Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kirby Summers True Crime Podcast. Today is December the 30th. It's one more day until we're into the new year. So I first want to wish you an incredible 2023. My goal is to do a couple of things, to keep working on uh, intelligence connected stories. I have been primarily working on the Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell case. I've also been working on the Franklin case, and I do other um, stories that are true crime that have a historic nature to it. I did some work on Hollywood, on Charles Manson, and how all of these sort of are interwoven together. So first, before I begin, I want to just thank you for your ongoing support. It means the world to me. And of course, how could I even think about starting the podcast without saying, hey, like the video and subscribe. My goal, I'm really surprised because I don't do a lot of podcasts. I have been doing more recently since I was sort of like booted off my main Twitter account. However, my goal is to get to 10,000 followers on YouTube in perhaps the next 2 months. So please help me get there. Subscribe. Well, listen, for those of you who do not know me, allow me to introduce myself. As I said, my name is Kirby Summers. I am a survivor of rape. I'm a survivor of human trafficking. I was sold to a brothel by my sister, who was 14 years my senior. And I am a sex slave survivor of 8 years to one of the elites connected to the Epstein case and other cases such as the Franklin scandal. Today, I am an author. I have written close to 15 books. That sounds like an amazing number, even for me. Many of them are on Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I also wrote my memoir, The Billionaire's Woman, which was put on like sort of a forever hold pattern by my former abuser. I wrote that in 1997 and finally published it on my own in 2019. To my knowledge, I am the only sex slave survivor that researches and writes newsletters. In my case, I have two: the Epstein Project newsletter, which is now in its fourth year, and one I began on Substack 3 months ago. So that is sort of where I delve into the intelligence aspect of the trafficking rings, which I believe are all interconnected. And I always say that. So for those of you who have been following me, you know that I am of the firm belief that all of these trafficking rings are interconnected. So the topic today includes a short commentary on Joe Rogan. I think some of you who have been listening to me know why. Um, and it's going to be brief on Joe. It's going to be brief. Um, and then I'm going to move on to Donald Trump and the fact that I have receipts. In fact, I put the receipts on the cover of this podcast, showing that indeed Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell trafficked a girl to Donald Trump. And of course, that is going to entail information on Bradley Edwards, one of the attorneys for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. And I guess it's going to wrap around and sort of show how mainstream media has not been doing their work. Because if I was able to piece this together, uh, frankly, with older mainstream media accounts, then I don't see why uh, regular mainstream who get paid, they have a salary, they have a 401k, they have a pension plan. I don't have any of these things. My work is entirely supported by the people who follow my work, who subscribe to my newsletters. Therefore, please subscribe, purchase my books, and who make a contribution on my Patreon or who make a one-time contribution on my on my website, either a one-time or a recurring. So I want to excuse myself because I still have COVID. It's been difficult because I'm also working every day. However, I hope that you give me a little leeway because it's difficult to breathe and speak and kind of like, I'm but I'm not one for feeling sorry for myself. So it's a matter of like I get up every day and I do what I have to do. And today I'm going to show you again with receipts that Donald Trump was indeed set up by Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I have a name for you. This can be proven. It's not just that I am taking a guess. And so, with all of that, again, like the video, I am going to begin. So lately, Joe Rogan has come onto people talking about Joe Rogan have sort of come onto my new Twitter saying, oh, Joe Rogan has been talking about Bill Clinton. Joe Rogan has said that Jeffrey Epstein works for the CIA or Mossad. Hello, people. That is information that everybody knows. Even your 4-year-old granddaughter has heard about Clinton, about Epstein being a spy. Let's remember that Alexander Acosta, who was selected by Donald Trump to be his labor secretary in 2017, when he was questioned, because whenever you are selected for a position, you are questioned before, members of the Congress sit you down and ask you questions to determine whether or not they're going to approve your nomination. And they did ask him about Jeffrey Epstein, and his response was, I was told to back off, meaning Epstein, that he belonged to intelligence. So the fact that Joe Rogan is basically repeating what the whole world knows does not mean that he is talking about the Jeffrey Epstein case. I want to, and the fact that he has mentioned Bill Clinton means nothing as well, because the whole world has been talking about Bill Clinton as it pertains to Jeffrey Epstein. There are flight logs that can be checked. We have photographs of Bill Clinton receiving a neck massage on Jeffrey Epstein 727. And so, again, Joe Rogan is not bringing anything new to the conversation. Joe Rogan, I may be wrong on this number and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding that Rogan was paid $50 million. So, I try to tell this to everyone, people that I know, my family members, my friends, people who follow me on my various platforms on social media, I try to say, hey, try not to have any idols, because when we talk about human trafficking, it crosses party lines. In my case, I'm neither a Democrat nor a Republican. I don't participate because I stopped believing in, quote, the system many, many decades ago. And I don't put anybody on a pedestal. I don't put a comedian like Joe Rogan on a pedestal. I don't put an actor on a pedestal. And you know what? I just have never done that. I had a store for a short time here in New York City, and I used to have celebrities walk into the store all the time. And many of them came in with an attitude like they wanted something free because they were famous. I'm sorry. You're just another person to me. I'm not going to fawn all over you because perhaps other people do. So celebrity, like politicians, mean very little to me. Um, Apparently, this is not the case with some followers who became very upset that Joe Rogan, that I basically said he's done nothing. Now, I want to remind you that on May 2020, Joe Rogan interviewed Adam Perry Lang. Adam Perry Lang is a celebrity chef, but he was also one of Jeffrey Epstein's personal chefs. And I mean, this has been confirmed by Virginia Giuffre. It's been confirmed in court documents. However, for 2 hours, Rogan did not ask Lang not one question about Epstein. He did not touch the topic at all. And frankly, he received a lot of backlash from the people who were listening. His Twitter page was all full up. And basically, I think one guy said on his YouTube channel, this guy was Jeffrey Epstein's private chef, and Joe was obsessed with him. And there is no mention of Epstein in this whole podcast. And Virginia Giuffre, I remember, also tweeted to Adam Perry Lang directly telling him how disappointed she was in him because she thought that he was going to step up and help the victims. And this was again in 2020. So that said, I'm going to now move on. So for those of you who have been giving me a hard time with Joe Rogan, again, he's an elite. There are only two kinds of people in this world. You either have money or you don't. You're either rich or you're not. And if you're not rich, you are a slave. We all are. It's been a master-slave relationship from day one. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. Okay. The second thing that I want to discuss today is the fact that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell indeed introduced, and when I say introduced in the world of human trafficking, the word introduced, just like the word model and the word massage, have different meanings. In the world of human trafficking, as you've learned during the past couple of years after the Epstein case blew wide open, the word introduced means sold. Somebody paid for the company of the trafficked person. And so my revelation today was revealed twice in a couple of my Epstein Project newsletters. That's really where I go deep, and I did this, I believe, well over a year ago. And I told people, hey, what the attorney, Bradley Edwards, has been saying about Donald Trump is really just a polite way. And I'll go over what he said because Bradley Edwards is part of the Donald Trump story that I want to discuss with you today. Um, and in fact, why don't we start there? So Bradley Edwards is the attorney for some of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, one of the uh, women who testified against Ghislaine Maxwell in her trial, November of 2021, is one of Bradley Edwards' clients. She did not identify herself in the trial. However, she had already made herself very public, and there have been articles written about her in the past connected with Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. And after Jeffrey Epstein's death, she, along with Virginia Giuffre and I think it was about 15 victims of Epstein, were allowed to speak in court. And so she was at the court at that day and she spoke. And so she's been in the press for reasons unknown to me. She, I guess, decided she didn't want her name to be made public during trial. However, the judge ruled recently because people whose names have been made public are before the documents that were recently released from the 2015 defamation claim that Virginia Giuffre brought against Ghislaine Maxwell, they wanted their names to be redacted. The judge ruled that because your name has already been made public, you gave up that right. So based on the judge's ruling, and the judge ruled this on several occasions during the course of the time that we've all been following the Epstein and Maxwell case. I don't see any reason why I should keep her name private, especially since I'm going to be reading to you an article. So her name is, I just have to find the article. Hold on. Okay, her name is Anuska DiGiorgio. And in 1996, a mainstream article, which is again on the cover of the podcast that you are listening to, that's the cover. I took that article and I took a photo of Epstein and Trump and I put it on the cover. So this podcast comes with receipts. All right, so the article ran, "How Sweet!" exclamation mark, Trump's Brit of all right. This is primarily the people who are covering the Epstein case are in the UK. So this was a UK periodical. And I'm going to read the whole thing to you, and then I have a lot more information to share with you. Again, Trump was 50 years old at the time. It was in 1996. Okay, so here goes nothing. Just weeks after ditching his second wife, America's best-known billionaire, Donald Trump, has fallen under the spell of a 20-year-old English girl. Trump, 50, who has failed in his bid to secure the services of Princess Diana's butler, Paul Burrell, was in search of another British trophy when he met London model Anuska DiGiorgio at a party in Manhattan. Several American millionaires already had their eye on Anuska, but she was there with Robert Maxwell's daughter, Ghislaine, who has introduced several of her attractive friends to the property developer. And none of His would-be rivals owned a vast mansion in Florida like Donald does, Mar-a-Lago. And then in parentheses, it reads, where I have dined with him and his outgoing wife, Marla, end parentheses, is enough to make any young girl go weak at the knees. After their meeting, Trump flew Madame Maxwell and the model south to the Sunshine State, where all three enjoyed a happy weekend together. When they returned to New York, Anushka was installed in one of Donald's many apartments there. Miss DeGiorgio likes older men. She went out once or twice with Joanna Lumley's ex-husband, Jeremy Lloyd, who is 45 years her senior. Okay, so from the, I'm going to read you another mainstream article about Anushka. DiGiorgio is a 40, and this is a more recent one. It is a 42-year-old British model and actress who is believed to currently live in Los Angeles. She is the daughter of financier Anthony and Barbara DiGiorgio, a former debutante and director of a jewelry company. Educated in the UK, DiGiorgio is said to have turned down a place at Oxford University to pursue a career as a model and actress. After starring in campaigns for the likes of Guy Laroche, she would then go on to feature in a number of films and television projects. Her most high-profile project is a 2014 film, Alfie, in which she starred alongside Jude Law. And she has also starred in reality TV show California Dreaming and a 2009 film called 21 and a Wake Up. She has been featured in Tadler magazine. So during the trial, it was discovered that, and she was 17 at the time, that one of Ghislaine Maxwell's friend, a guy by the name of, I'm getting it. I hate calling him Lord, but I will because some of my followers are from the UK. Lord Robert Hanson. I'm sorry. It's just that the way mainstream media has portrayed the life of a trafficked woman and has, in effect, been co-conspirators in what I consider a cover-up. I'm sure you consider it a cover-up too. Is sometimes very difficult for me to absorb. So, in the article, it says that in 2004, Anushka told Tadler that she, quote, dated Lord Robert Hanson on and off for years. Now, Robert Hanson, in the court case, when this woman who went by the name of, I believe she used, I will see what name she used in court. In court, she used Kate, and she first met Maxwell in London through her, quote, older boyfriend. And the boyfriend, by the way, was Hanson, who went to Oxford with Ghislaine Maxwell when she was 17 years old. So Hanson, who was Ghislaine Maxwell's age, brought her to uh, Maxwell's home in London, where he introduced her. Again, she was 17. And so Maxwell invited her for tea at her London townhouse. And she told Kate about Epstein. And then she invited her to meet him. And at the time that she met Epstein, so she returned. She was invited by Maxwell to give Epstein's foot a little squeeze to show him how strong she was, despite the fact that she was very tiny. So she was 17, but she was, she was a small in stature and not a big girl. She testified to this. And then apparently she gave Epstein a foot massage. And at the same time, he also had her massage his shoulders. A couple of weeks later, Maxwell called Kate to ask whether she would do her, quote, a favor and come back to her house and give Epstein a massage, even though Anushka had no training in massage at all. So when she arrived at Maxwell's house, um, Maxwell took her upstairs, and I think by now we've all seen the upstairs of Galen's house in London. It's now sold. It's the exact place where Virginia Giuffre and Prince Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell are standing. So that's the second level. We've all seen it. So in this case, she wants Anushka to come up to her townhouse, to her bedroom. And basically, what she did was she put an outfit on the bed for her. It was a schoolgirl outfit, and she told her to wear it when she massaged Jeffrey Epstein, who was on the second floor in Galen's bedroom. Well, Anushka did as she was told, and she found Epstein in the room wearing a robe. He took the robe off. She gave him a massage, and then he initiated a sexual act with her. So Maxwell afterwards called her back for another similar type of meeting with Epstein. And then she told her, I'm so glad you're here. You did such a good job the last time that he, meaning Epstein, wanted you to come back. And so this time, for the second encounter, Epstein was already naked when Anushka walked into the room and left her in there. And then Maxwell's parting words to her were, have a good time. She further testified that she traveled at Jeffrey Epstein's expense several times to New York, to Palm Beach, to Florida, to Little St. James in the Virgin Islands, and that it had been Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, who invited her to Epstein's private island to give him massages, and it would be Ghislaine Maxwell who informed Anushka of the travel arrangements. Again, she said that during a visit to the Palm Beach residence when she was about 18, she wore a schoolgirl outfit, which was a pleated skirt, white panties, white socks, and a shirt. And it was like, this, she was 17, but she looked a lot younger, so she wore it. And then Maxwell basically said to her, I thought it would be fun for you to take Jeffrey his tea in this outfit. So Maxwell often spoke with Anushka about sex. I mean, it wasn't like they were talking about other things. Like, I mean, we have to remember that Maxwell was a procurer. And while we haven't heard a lot about female procurers, and in her case, an alleged rapist, because she is said by some of the victims that she too participated in the abuse. Um, they're always working, when they're not out there looking for new prey, they're still grooming the prey they have caught. And so the way Galen handled Anuska is very similar to how she handled other victims who have come forward and shared their stories. She basically was saying that a lot of things about sexual topics with Anuska. And then she did broach her about whether or not she knew other girls that could give Epstein, um, uh, let's call it the what one does with one's mouth on a man, and that she then explained to her that Epstein needed to have sex 3 times a day. And this is stuff that Anuska, actually said in court during the Maxwell trial. And then, according to Anuska, Maxwell also said to her, "You know what he likes? Cute, young, and pretty like you." So Anuska said that she kept in contact with Epstein until around 2012, and she was about 24 years old when she last traveled with the couple, meaning Maxwell and Epstein, but that she continued her contact with Epstein through her early 30s. She said that she had a mix of denial, which is normal. You kind of don't want to feel that you have been used and abused, and I can understand that she had a mix of denial and fear. She then said in court, "I did not want to admit what had happened to me, and I felt that by ceasing, sorry, I'm just going to say I can't say that word right now. I don't know why. Communication, I would have to acknowledge the events that had taken place, and I would have to say something. I was also fearful of disengaging because I had witnessed how connected they both were, and I was fearful." Now, she's not considered a minor victim in the charges because she was over the age of consent. However, she is still a trafficked person, and she was still someone who was one of the 4 people selected to testify against Ghislaine Maxwell. And her testimony, I believe, may have helped to actually, the jury could not convict Maxwell on any of the counts based solely on the testimony from Kate because she was over the age of consent. Uh, and this is what the Judge Judith Nathan, instructed the jury. However, the 2 of the conspiracy charges Maxwell was found guilty of: conspiracy to entice a minor to travel to engage in criminal sexual activity, and conspiracy to transport a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, were related to allegations by all 4 of the accusers. Because while Anuska was 17 in the UK, in New York, she was still considered to be a minor, and she had traveled to New York. Um, I want to say that I want to talk for a very brief, not long, about Brad Edwards. In the Netflix special on Ghislaine Maxwell, which is called, I believe, Ghislaine Maxwell. It's um, similar to the first Epstein thing that was put out on Netflix. Now, what I want to say about these quote documentaries that are put out on Netflix is that they talk in a superficial manner about things that happened and they don't delve under the surface, which is the same thing, by the way, that Joe Rogan does, which is the same thing that some other people that are even indie media do. This entire Epstein case has really been amazing to sort of witness uh, in terms of what is said, what is not said, the players involved, both on the mainstream level and on the indie level, how people have tried to defend Trump. Now, I've already read to you that Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein basically sold Anushka to Donald Trump. Okay, I'm not getting into the Jane Doe story because you can read that. You know, there was a lawsuit filed against Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump. And I don't care what you say about that. That girl is a real girl. She had real allegations. She was 14 years old at the time and she was threatened. And then she basically disappeared because when somebody as powerful as Donald Trump, who was at the time running for president, is hell bent on silencing you, you could end up dead. Like for me, I've had three attempts on my life. I was held hostage for 5 days at knife point by a hired assassin. I was shot at while walking down a street in New York City. And then I have an apartment that there's an area that's sort of like a dining room area. It has a dropped ceiling, meaning that there's a crawl space. And I'm not going to get into the fact that my landlord is also connected to all of this because, like in New York, I just want to make a blanket statement. Real estate in New York has been washed so that the real estate in New York belongs to people who are connected to Epstein on many levels. It belongs to organized crime like the Lansky family. I don't know if you're aware of Bernie Kornfeld, but uh, he's another sort of like a pedophile Ponzi schemer connected to Reagan's White House and connected to the Playboy Mansion and Hugh Hefner. Um, and so most of the real estate in New York is owned by family members. And actually it's really good that I just brought this up because we know, for example, that Mark Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein's brother, owns some of the property, so that he owned 301 East 66th Street, where the models, quote, models, okay? So you know that the word models doesn't mean models in the language of a trafficked person. But I'm going to use it for the sake of this podcast, where the models lived was 301 East 66th Street. That's also where the Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak, used to stay. It's so that the real estate ends up being laundered. That's how they launder their money. And so in my apartment, the third attempt at my life that I'm aware of, there might be more that I'm not aware of, was I had a very heavy light fixture and I had a dining table right under it, and the light fixture was just above my head over the chair where I normally sit. And I had to get up for something. Um, and suddenly the light fixture, with no sign of it being damaged in any way, shape, or form, suddenly dropped. Now, had I been sitting where I had been sitting a second earlier, it would have killed me. And so these are the three attempts on my life, although I do get threats on a very regular basis. So I understand Jane Doe, who filed the lawsuit against Donald Trump and then just disappeared. And then I do want to, before I wrap up this podcast, talk about Bradley Edwards and who he worked for at some point, who he is connected to, and his comment on Donald Trump, because Bradley Edwards has not been straightforward. None of these attorneys have, not David Boies, not J. Stanley Pottinger, none of them. Everyone has a role to play, and that role, I'm sorry if I'm repetitive, that role is called a cover up. Okay, so Bradley Edwards, before he became partners with David Boies's long-term friend, associate, and also a legal partner. And by the way, I have told you that Pottinger is CIA. And if I haven't told you or you haven't heard it, I have it in one of my podcasts. Um, uh, so Bradley Edwards finally became a partner with David Boies's Private 007. That's what he calls him, J. Stanley Pottinger. However, before that, he worked with an attorney named Scott Rothstein. Now, Scott Rothstein is currently in jail for running a $1.2 billion Ponzi scheme, one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history. Um, and the Ponzi scheme was really based on the fact that he told, quote, investors that his firm was representing numerous underage girls who had sex with Palm Beach billionaire and convicted child sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. And that this was before Epstein's second arrest, and that he had flight logs showing that Epstein flew very prominent people, including former President Bill Clinton, on his private jet with some of the women that he was representing. He told investors that Epstein, Clinton, and other celebrities involved had no choice but to settle the cases and he presented this as a treasure trove. It was like sort of like invest in me, and you'll get, when these victims get their settlement money, because no one is going to want to be outed, you're going to get a percentage of that. So give me money. That's what he was saying. And frankly, Edwards was working in his office. And in fact, the law firm of Rothstein did have cases involving Jeffrey Epstein's victims. But he basically was running a Ponzi scheme. Um, he was, according to federal documents, and in the Rothstein case, it's kind of like dicey because Brad Edwards did work there. And I want to just get back to the fact that another person that you're aware of worked there as well, or at least he had an office there. Roger Stone had an office there. And I have one more thing to add about Roger Stone. You know that Roger Stone is connected to Donald Trump, right? So there are like all these connections to Donald Trump through Bradley Edwards, who made it a point to tell the public that when he was working on investigating the case, that it was Trump who had been the most forthcoming, or that he uh, spoke to him. And I think I have the okay. So Bradley Edwards said, "The only thing I can say about President Trump is that he is the only person who, in 2009, when I served a lot of subpoenas on a lot of people, or at least gave notice to some pretty connected people that I want to talk to them, is the only person who picked up the phone and said, 'Let's just talk,'" said Edwards. Now, I happen to know Trump, and Trump is a very close friend and business associate of my abuser. Trump will talk to everyone. It doesn't mean that Trump was innocent, as we can see by the subject of this podcast. I introduced you to a trafficked woman who was sold to Donald Trump by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein, and we have receipts to prove that. Anuska DiGiorgio met Donald Trump through Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, and then Trump installed her into an apartment in Trump Tower on 57th Street and Fifth Avenue until he grew tired of her. And then at that point, he met Melania, who is also alleged to have come via Jeffrey Epstein, despite what mainstream writes. Jeffrey Epstein took credit for introducing him to Melania. They had already introduced him, according to this article, to many other beauties. All right. So, and then we have to remember that Donald Trump did say, "I've known Jeff for 15 years, terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with." It's even said he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it. Jeffrey enjoys his social life. So with that, I'm going to try to wrap this up. We've covered Rogan. We've covered Donald Trump being connected and sort of having some kind of arrangement with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell regarding Anuska, who was one of the four witnesses in the trial against Ghislaine Maxwell. There is mainstream media information to back up this. This is not some out of the ordinary um, kind of thought that I'm putting out there. So again, stop idolizing politicians, because it's the politicians who are always connected to these trafficking rings that span decades, cross borders, cross party lines, and stop idolizing celebrities. All right. The goal is for us to become as knowledgeable as we can about these rings, because it's not just children, as you have become aware, and it's not just poor people, because Anushka, her parents were very well to do. All right. I mean, she was going to go to the same college, Oxford, that Glenn Maxwell went to, which is the best. But she decided instead to become an actress, which she did, an actress model with the help of Jeffrey Epstein, who, in return for that, um, had her become what she sadly became for a good number of years. And that happens because girls have poor self-esteem, and the predators know how to use that to their advantage. And then, of course, once you breach the initial wall of you've gotten someone to do something based on the fact that they have poor self-esteem, and I'm sure it was taped, then that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell had something on her. They had her on tape doing something to Epstein. Um, and that would have ruined her chances of doing anything ever. And then, of course, it's like a no way out situation. Um, then the threats come and in some cases, some people are missing. I don't put it. One last comment. Mainstream has made no comment at all, no statement about any of the victims, whether they were children, male or female, disappearing and dying or being murdered. But I know that in these trafficking rings, based on my research, many of them are simply murdered. And from what everyone was able to see, only a couple of dozen victims stepped forward out of what would have been thousands. He had this going for about 20 years, perhaps a little bit more. And he was meeting girls every single day. And he had everyone gathering more girls, not just Ghislaine Maxwell. Everyone was always looking for new girls. So that the numbers after, let's, even if we max it at 20 years, had to be into the thousands. Some of these girls, yes, settled, but not, I would not say into the thousands. I would say 100, 200, 300, 400, maybe 500 girls settled. What, how many of these girls are dead? I do have one story that I will share at another time of one of his victims who was said to have committed suicide, but I believe it was not suicide, and I do have that story for another time. So with that, I'm going to again ask you to like the video, uh, ignore the politicians, and please don't make this a Republican Democrat issue. Don't do that because again, it crosses party lines. Subscribe. And again, it's Kirby Summers, and I wish you the very, very best for the new year. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.